The South Carolina Department of Education has created a framework for personalized learning that supports all students as they seek to achieve the knowledge, skills, and characteristics identified in the profile of the South Carolina graduate. Fostering student ownership of learning, developing learner profiles and learner pathways, adopting flexible learning environments. Each student's educational experience is tailored to meet his or her unique strengths, needs, and goals. Learner profiles include up-to-date records that include each student's unique strengths, needs, and goals. Data from pre- and post-assessments are used to inform learner profiles. For learner pathways, learners and educators work together to create the best pathways for each learner to learn. Students progress based on their readiness level, and pathways adapt to each student's learning progress, motivation, and goals. Pace of instruction is based on individual student need. Evidence of learning is used to determine when a student is ready to move on. Flexible learning environments refer to when and where learning takes place. With the flexible learning environment, learning takes place all the time and everywhere. Learning takes place beyond the school day, school year, and school walls. Also, the learning environment within the school is adjusted to meet the needs of learners. When thinking about how these components of personalized learning can be applied in the classroom, we can break it down into 6 components. We will discuss components 1 through 5 now, and we'll get to the 6th later on. The first component is a pre-assessment to identify each student's strengths and weaknesses. This data will then be utilized to create a second component, learner profiles. Based on the learner profiles, personalized learning pathways can be co-created by the student and teacher. After students have completed their personalized learning pathways, they can have a choice in how they demonstrate mastery of the content to show that he or she is ready to complete the 5th component, a mastery-based assessment, in order to see if they are ready to move on to the next goal. When looking to implement this model for personalized learning, there are a few things to consider. Student agency is a major component of personalized learning. Learners must be able to take ownership of their learning. The physical learning environment should be flexible. Resources should be available, and students should be able to move freely as they engage in the learning experiences. Flexibility of pace allows for students to be able to have some flexibility in their instruction dependent on when they prove they are ready to move on to the next learning goal. This model will be replicated for each unit. Everything just can't be thrown on the students at one time. The first stage of this cycle is the pre-assessment. We must be able to find out what student strengths and weaknesses are. For the pre-assessment, we'll include all standards from the unit. Some tools that can be useful for this are Mastery Connect, Microsoft Forms, and Google Forms. The data from the pre-assessment will be used to create learner profiles. Learner profiles are up-to-date records that provide a deep understanding of each student's progress toward meeting the knowledge, skills, and characteristics of the profile of the South Carolina graduate, as well as his or her unique strengths, needs, and goals. Meaningful evidence of learning from multiple sources is used to inform learner profiles. When creating learner profiles, we can look at who is the student, what are the student's interests, what standards will he or she focus on based on the data from the pre-assessment, how does he or she learn best, and a co-created instructional plan that is created by the student and teacher. Based on the information from the learner profile that was co-created by the teacher and student, the instruction will be personalized to that unique student. Each student can be working on different things in different ways at the same time on their own learning pathway. Students enter the progression of learning based on their readiness level, and pathways adapt to each student's learning progress, motivation, and goals. Evidence of learning is used to determine when a student is ready to move on. For example, different centers can be created in the classroom based on the various instructional strategies from the learner profiles. Digital resources can be available to students using a class website. However, personalized learning does not have to include technology since everyone doesn't learn that way. We want to make sure there are still some physical resources available for the students as well. Another center idea can be small groups led by a teacher and/or even a student or group of students. For small groups, I would suggest creating a calendar that shows students which standards the small group will be addressing on which days. This will help the student with co-creating his or her learning pathway. Once a student has worked through his learning pathway and he feels as though he has mastered his learning goal, he can choose how he wants to demonstrate mastery of the content. This is an example of a choice board that can be utilized to give students a choice in how they want to demonstrate mastery. At the top of each box is the type of project that the student can create. Under the project type, there are tools that the student can choose to use to create their project. The very last project idea box says idea, because we don't want to limit a student's creativity to only what we have in our minds. If they have a different idea, they can choose to do that as well. As the teacher, you don't have to worry about knowing how to use each tool. Each tool is hyperlinked to a tutorial video that the student can watch to learn how to use each tool if they need to. A rubric will be vital for this component. The rubric can be used as a guide for the students. However, make sure to leave room in the rubric to allow for the student to be able to tap into their own creative juices. Looking at this, you may say, how am I going to go to all these different places to look at all the students' work? This is the purpose for the last box at the bottom. This box can be hyperlinked to take students to a Google form. When students click on Submit Project Here, they will be directed to fill out a Google form. You can put whatever information you want to put into the Google form, but I simply put name and project link. From this Google form, you can create a spreadsheet with all the students' project links for your convenience. View description below for links to these documents. Component 5 is a mastery-based assessment. After students have demonstrated their learning, the teacher and student can collectively decide whether or not the student is ready to move on to a final mastery-based assessment. This mastery-based assessment is a quick 4 or 5 question assessment that assesses the student's understanding of the learning goal they have been working on. This data will be used to determine the student's readiness to move on. If you choose, you can award students with badges for each standard they master. Here are a few resources that you can use for badging in the classroom. According to the South Carolina Framework for Personalized Learning, with flexible learning environments, learning takes place all the time and everywhere as students work toward achieving the profile of the South Carolina graduate. Learning takes place beyond the school day, school year, and school walls. This leads us to Component 6, Homework and Enrichment. Homework should be practiced for what the students are learning in school. However, with everyone working on different things at the same time, this would be difficult. For homework and enrichment, project-based learning is perfect. Students can complete learning experiences that incorporate all of the learning goals for the current unit in a real-world situation. The Buck Institute for Education has some excellent resources for project-based learning. Check out the links in the description below. Thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, you can refer to the resources in the description below. Also, feel free to reach out to your school's instructional technologist for more information and other ideas.